He was 75 when he made the decision, and in that moment he believed he was making the right choice. But after everything unfolded, he confided in me that had been the greatest mistake of his life. He was someone who had always been close to me, someone I held in high regard, someone who had taught me more than I could ever express. When he shared his story, I could see the deep regret in his eyes. Not for his age, not for the time that had passed, but for choosing to move to a care facility. He often said, "If only I had known the true meaning of what that would be." That is why I feel compelled to share his thoughts with you today, especially for anyone contemplating such a decision for themselves or for a loved one. There are 5 painful truths he learned the hard way, truths that, if he'd known them beforehand, would have changed everything for him. He would have chosen a different path, one that preserved his dignity, his independence, and his sense of self. Take a moment to listen, because what I'm about to share might make you reconsider how you view aging, independence, and the value of living on your own terms. The first truth is the loss of freedom. He believed it was just a matter of relocating, but he quickly realized that by doing so, he was sacrificing more than just his home. He lost the right to make his own decisions. In his house, he could choose when to wake up, when to eat, when to go for a walk. If he wanted something different for dinner, he could make it. If he wanted to stay up late reading, there was nothing to stop him. But in the care facility, everything was scheduled and predetermined. Breakfast had to be eaten at a set time, whether he was hungry or not. The lights went out at a certain hour, regardless of his tiredness. He needed permission to go outside and wait for someone to assist him. Even his choice of clothes or meals were decisions made for him. At first he resisted, but over time he learned to accept it, because there was no alternative. In doing so, he learned a painful truth: once you lose your independence, it's incredibly difficult to regain it. The second truth is the feeling of being forgotten. When he moved, his family promised they would visit him often. And for a while they kept that promise. His daughter came every week, his grandchildren visited on weekends, and that gave him a sense of continuity. But over time the visits grew fewer. First a phone call instead of a visit, then just a quick text. Eventually, even that stopped. He watched the world outside continue, while he remained in his room isolated. The holidays were the hardest. Everyone promised they would come, but at the last minute, plans changed, and he was left alone in the common area, surrounded by other elderly residents, all staring at the door, hoping for a familiar face. It wasn't that people didn't care. It was simply that life moved on without him. And the longer time passed, the more people assumed that he had adjusted, that he no longer needed their attention, but the truth was he needed it more than ever. The third truth is the loss of purpose. Back at home, even the simplest tasks gave him a sense of worth. Watering the plants, brewing coffee, tidying up, reading the newspaper. Those small activities made him feel alive, active. In the nursing home, however, everything was taken care of for him. Meals were prepared, cleaning was done by others, even his clothes were laid out. There was nothing left for him to do, no responsibility, no routine. At first, he thought it would be a relief, but he soon realized that without any purpose, the days stretched out endlessly. He watched others around him, people full of energy, slowly fade into inactivity. Without something to get up for, it was easy to lose the will to live, to lose the energy that kept him moving. The fourth truth is the rapid decline of the body. Before moving, he was still active. He took daily walks, ran errands, cooked for himself, kept a routine that kept him fit. But in the nursing home, everything was arranged to minimize effort. He no longer had to cook, no longer had to walk much, and whenever he needed help, he just pressed a button. But over time, the less he moved, the weaker he became. He watched others who had been able-bodied, now dependent on canes, walkers, or even wheelchairs. If you don't use your body, you lose it. And once that strength is gone, it's almost impossible to regain it. Now, before I share the final truths, I hope you're finding this story valuable. If you do, please share it with someone who might need to hear this. The fifth truth is the sacrifice of privacy and dignity. At home, he had his own space, his own moments of solitude. He could close the door when he wanted to be alone. But in the nursing home, privacy was a distant memory. The staff was in and out of his room constantly, and checks were done at scheduled times. He often had to share a room with strangers. Even the most private moments, like showering or using the bathroom, required assistance. No matter how kind the staff was, losing autonomy over such personal matters was incredibly humbling. He wasn't prepared for that. He never thought he would reach a point where he'd have to ask permission for the most basic of things, like managing his hygiene or simply going for a walk. Losing privacy made him feel like he wasn't really himself anymore. The sixth and final truth is that leaving is harder than you think. When he moved, he thought that if he didn't like it, he could always go back home. But he soon discovered that leaving a nursing home wasn't so simple. His house had been sold, the furniture gone. His children had begun selling his things. When he said he wanted to return, they asked if he was sure he could manage on his own. And for the first time, he began to doubt himself. The more time passed, the more he felt like he couldn't survive on his own, and like many others, he found himself stuck in a situation he thought was temporary, but that had become permanent. He didn't regret getting older, he regretted thinking the nursing home was his only option. Today, I'm certain that if he could go back, he would have done everything to stay in his own home, to explore alternative solutions, and to ask for help without giving up his independence. What seemed like a simple change turned out to be a trap, and escaping it became nearly impossible. So, what about you? Have you ever thought about what it truly means to lose your freedom? Have you wondered if there's another way to age with dignity? If you or a loved one are considering this decision, take a moment to ask yourself, is this really the only option, or is it just the easiest one? The freedom, autonomy, and sense of purpose you have today are far more valuable than you realize. Once lost, it's incredibly hard to regain. Did this story make you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.